Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas. Coming up in the show. Emboldened by their majority in the House of Representatives, some Democrats are determined to do all they can to impeach President Trump if there's evidence to confirm his alleged misdeeds. Others, however, are wary that pursuing impeachment might simply play to Trump's advantage. In Mexico, resentment of the thousands of Central Americans travelling north is growing. Locals are less and less likely to offer food and shelter to migrants, with harsh consequences for those determined to reach the US. And with the rate of deforestation in the Amazon rainforest accelerating, we take a look at the land disputes that are seeing indigenous communities pushed out as businesses roll in. Despite Special Counsel Robert Mueller not finding evidence that Donald Trump colluded with Russia in the 2016 election, a growing number of Democrats want Trump to face justice for alleged obstruction of justice and violation of campaign finance laws. But other prominent Democrats, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders, have shied away from talk of impeachment, suggesting such a move could play in Trump's favour ahead of the 2020 election. Erin Ogunki has the story.
To impeach or not to impeach President Donald Trump? For U.S. Democrats, that is the pressing question. While top Democrat Nancy Pelosi has not fully eliminated the impeachment option, she has suggested it should only be a last resort.
I do believe that impeachment is one of the most divisive forces, paths that we could go down to in our country. But if the path of fact-finding takes us there, we have no choice. But we're not there yet.
Pelosi insists lawmakers would be better off using congressional investigative powers to hold the president accountable. Representatives have already subpoenaed the full unredacted Mueller report, an accounting firm the president hired to prepare his financial statements, as well as former White House counsel Donald McGahn, a key witness in Robert Mueller's obstruction of justice investigation. The special counsel's report details nearly a dozen times when the president potentially attempted to hinder the probe. Elements several Democrats, including presidential hopefuls Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, say are sufficient to introduce the articles of impeachment.
The accountability for the president lies through Congress, and that's the impeachment process. If Donald Trump can do all that he tried to do to impede an investigation into his own wrongdoing and the attack by a foreign government, then it gives license to the next president and the next president and the next president to do exactly the same thing.
The Democrats face a veritable catch-22. On the one hand, partisan impeachment proceedings could strengthen President Trump politically. Many say voters across the aisle would rather hear the candidates tackle policy issues like health care and immigration, rather than the president's misdeeds. To illustrate the concern, after initiating impeachment proceedings against Bill Clinton in 1998, Republicans suffered historic losses in the midterm elections that followed. On the other hand, many Democrats argue refusing to pursue impeachment could send the message that Congress will tolerate potentially illegal actions out of fear of the political consequences that could come with addressing them.
Anti-migrant sentiment is growing in Mexico's Chiapas state. The generous help that many locals were once willing to give Central Americans making their way north is now waning. This lack of local assistance means thousands of migrants are now finding themselves stranded in the heat with minimal food and water, and with little hope of reaching their goal of the United States anytime soon. Thomas Waterhouse has the story.
They had hoped to keep marching north to escape the violence and hardship in their homeland. But the long road to the US ends here for these Honduran migrants, as they're rounded up for deportation by officials in southern Mexico. For those being detained, this is a far cry from the more humane treatment that President López Obrador pledged when he came to power.
They beat up my son. This dog of a police officer beat up my son.
The immigration officials have no right to detain us. We want peace. We want to work. That's why I've come here from Honduras, because there's nothing back there.
Back in January, Mexico handed out 12-month humanitarian visas to help migrants. But the deluge of arrivals has seen the government take off its velvet glove to use its iron fist instead. And the locals, who were once happy to offer their help, say the migrants are now bothersome and some are even aggressive. This is the town of Mapastepec. In the last 12 months, 6 different caravans have arrived here alone.
It's become really bad. The migrants are invading our land. We can't go out because it's not safe. It's really worrying.
The truth is that there are a lot of migrants. It's a good thing that President Lopez Obrador is starting to disperse them, because there is a lot of unrest.
With residents now turning a blind eye rather than flinging their arms wide open, life is becoming increasingly difficult for the men, women and children who are stranded here.
The shop owners switched off the lights and shut up shop. There was a little boy who was sick, and they just closed the pharmacy. They didn't want to sell to him.
One poll conducted in February found that 83% of respondents believed the migrants could cause problems for Mexico, while 62% said the government should be getting tougher.
A Brazilian appeals court has unanimously decided to reduce the length of Luis Inácio Lula da Silva's 12-year jail sentence for bribery and money laundering, one of 2 cases for which he's serving time. One of the former president's sentences has now been cut to 8 years and 10 months. The ruling could mean that the man known as Lula is eligible for semi-open prison later this year. The 73-year-old leftist icon marked his first year in jail earlier this month. Our number of the week is 54. That's the percentage by which the rate of deforestation in the Amazon rainforest increased between January 2018 and January 2019, according to the NGO Amazon. And it seems that things aren't about to get better anytime soon. Land conflict in Brazil's Amazon is coming to a head between indigenous peoples and so-called land invaders, who take their lead from the pro-business, anti-environment rhetoric of ultra-conservative President Jair Bolsonaro.
A trail of chopped down trees cuts through the Arara people's protected land. It's a sight that's become all too familiar to local chief Tatji.
It's sad when you see the trees lying on the ground like that. That piece of wood is already dead.
Last year, several indigenous Arara families moved here to try and push illegal loggers from the outskirts of their land, where the Trans-Amazonian highway snakes through the forest. But after President Jair Bolsonaro's election in October, these intrusions have just increased. Frustrated but defiant, Tatji and his warriors have resorted to using extreme measures to fend off invaders. Recently, they set fire to this illegal logging truck.
If the authorities don't do anything, we will take action in our own way. And when we act, Bolsonaro's people will be responsible for the bloodshed.
But hours later, the truck set off once again for the forest. The mighty Amazon teems with illegal loggers, farmers, miners and land speculators. Little by little, they eat away at this vast forest, sometimes killing those who stand in their way. Leaders from the Arara and other tribes voiced their anger about these invasions in a recent meeting with a senior cabinet minister.
We want the government to do something urgently, because there will be trouble for the illegal farmers. Is that what you want?
I am a chief. I will die if you kill my land, but I will fight for my people.
These leaders say the resolve of invaders has been stiffened by the far-right president's discourse. Bolsonaro spurns the indigenous people's culture and their right to land, which was won after centuries of oppression. But his emissary, General Carlos Santos Cruz, says the government is not encouraging crime.
That is absurd. The invasion of any land, the occupation of any area, indigenous or not, or private, is criminal. This can't be tolerated. It's a case for the police.
Deforestation levels reached a decade high in Brazil last year. The rates are highest here in Pará state. The Amazon's best hope of survival lies with indigenous people. Government maps show how the Arara land has withstood deforestation since it was proclaimed 25 years ago. This trend is similar for other indigenous lands. But protecting these trees continues to be a life and death struggle. And local activists often pay the ultimate price.
It's an often dubious honour reserved for Hollywood A-listers and iconic historical figures. And now Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is going to have his moment in the Simpsons spotlight, much to the Twittersphere's delight. According to Canadian media, the episode in question involves Lisa Simpson being granted asylum in Canada during a family trip to Niagara Falls. It's also set to touch on recent accusations that Trudeau meddled in the prosecution of a corporate engineering giant. Trudeau was asked to appear as himself in the cartoon, but he respectfully declined. Well, that's all we have time for this time in Inside the Americas. See you again next time.